What time is it?
It's gonna be special. They gonna talk about this forever.
Welcome to American Football Stories.
Puts his head down, crashes and spins, and dives. Touchdown!
Bringing together the many perspectives that make up college football in the NFL.
Football is one of the greatest sports ever invented.
From players and coaches.
Believe, baby, believe, baby.
Hey, we playing to win right here, fellas.
To the front office and scouts.
The public is finally beginning to catch up, but they don't even know half the truth.
Us against the world, let's get it.
Your hosts, Robert Parker and Nick Knudsen, bring you American Football Stories.
Welcome to the American Football Stories podcast, brought to you by Coach Paint. Today is November 18th, 2020. I'm your host, Nick Knudsen, joined by my co-host, Robert Parker. And on today's episode, we'll give you our Big Ten Midseason Report with noted Big Ten and Indiana Hoosier connoisseur, Jeremy Kohlman. What's up, Jeremy? Thanks for joining us tonight.
Well, thanks for having me on, guys. Ready to talk some football.
Welcome in, Jeremy.
All right, Jeremy, we're going to start with your beloved Indiana Hoosiers. We did some practice episodes over the summer, and we gave you quite a hard time because you basically projected the Indiana. You were basically like the Chicago Bears SNL sketch with you're like the Hoosiers by 100. The Hoosiers would play Michigan State, Hoosiers by 70. Like, you were just Indiana. And here we are sitting halfway through the Big Ten schedule. Indiana's 4-0. And not only that, but the Penn State game you could call a little bit of luck, but hey, everybody needs a dose of luck to win some games. And you guys have certainly had your share go against you. But why is Indiana 4-0? Like, what's different from 2020 versus the previous teams that Tom Allen has fielded at Indiana?
Well, I'll tell you one thing right now. It's not like there is some drastic difference in talent from this year's team to last year's team. What it is this year is that there is a complete and total confidence throughout that entire team that they are going out, that they would go out there and they are going to beat the team across from them. They have thought it every single time they have suited up on a Saturday this year. And sure enough, they've gotten 4 wins in 4 games. It's rare times for Hoosiers fans to have an undefeated Indiana squad that also has 4 Big Ten wins nonetheless.
How much do you think that Penn State victory propelled this run? Because that was I watched the end of that game. I was pretty epic finish.
Yeah, epic finish. They're calling it the Reach. They're selling T-shirts now.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you own an Indiana Hoosiers man cave, that picture is going to be on your wall in the near future,
forever.
right?
Forever.
Yeah, that's going to be a big one. So let's go back to they got more confidence this year. You don't think the talent's a whole lot different, but in terms of expectations, I guess as Michael Penix outplayed expectations, because we saw a little bit from him last year. I know you were high on him in the preseason, but has he outplayed expectations? And then also, what's been a pleasant surprise with this group? Like, what's a little better than what you expected?
I'd say Michael Penix is right where I thought he'd be. You know, he is this very talented gunslinger, and there are some throws at times that every Hoosier fan cringes because you're thinking, oh, God, I hope that gets there. Or, oh, God, there's triple coverage there. He's had a few of those types of throws this year, and I want him to stay aggressive. So that's a good thing. That's a good thing. But I don't think he's exactly lit the world on fire. Hoosier fans knew what Michael Penix was capable of. We've seen flashes of it. He's starting to finally put it all together. So I wouldn't say he's lit the world on fire, but he's definitely led this team. You know, he's a team captain. He's a big reason why they're 4-0.
Any pleasant surprises?
Pleasant surprises. I'd say the overall defensive effort has been really stellar this year. I'll go with that as my first one. They have really been able to scheme some sacks this year, more than they have been able to in past years, which was a bit surprising to me because, like I said, it's about the same team that was there last year from a defensive standpoint. Pretty much returned all 11 starters. So they're just, again, it goes back to they're playing with more confidence and they know they can get the job done. Secondly, I'd say the receiving core has been a nice surprise. outside of Watt Fillior, it was kind of a debate on who was really going to step up this year. And Ty Freifogel, the senior, has been amazing through 4 games. He's put up video game-like numbers the past 2 weeks against Michigan State and Michigan.
How meaningful was that Michigan victory to the program?
Oh, I mean, it was huge. First time they had beaten them since 1987. That's 25 years of bashing your head against the wall and getting the exact same result, and to come away with that win. I mean, that was huge this year. Tom Allen has even said it that after that game, the only regret he has was that the fans weren't there to help celebrate him. He said they would have torn down both goalposts, rushed the field, did the whole hurrah, if it wasn't the COVID season of football.
Yeah, is there a little bit of bitterness as an Indiana fan where you're like, of course, this is the one year we're 4-0, we can't go see any games?
Yeah, it does seem very ironic, where, the Hoosier fan bases, bled their hearts out in the seats. Now they can't be there when we're probably been the most proud of them,
Yeah, that's great. That's a tough break. That's a tough break this season. Well, how about this? This might be jumping ahead of things here, but do you see Tom Allen sticking around to build on this, or do you think he gets take another job? And we'll talk about one of those jobs he might be able to take a little later in the show, but I certainly think Tom Allen's going to be a hot commodity for some bigger schools with deeper wallets.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I will give Indiana credit for is, they just gave him a recent 7-year extension, and it's basically a 7-year extension every year he wins. Every year he wins, he gets another year tacked onto his contract. So they've put into place a little bit of, hopes that he won't go somewhere else because he's got a never-ending contract, so to say. But, I mean, success. I mean, when you have the type of success he's had at a place like Indiana, yeah, you're going to draw, other teams' interests. He's been able to do something with a program that historically has the most losses of any football program in Division I football history.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't know that because they're playing well, and you've just kind of taken them for granted, the past few years. It's like, oh, they get close. But now that it's finally starting to come together and the success is out there, it doesn't surprise me that Tom Allen is going to garner some offseason interest from other teams. I don't know if he takes anything at this point. He has got the 100% support of this school, 100% support of the fans, the administration. I mean, he is, God in football form in Bloomington in Indiana. So it'll take a lot to get him away.
Right.
Because, he is a Hoosier, born and bred Hoosier.
He's a grad, right?
His dream job was going to be to coach in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
And the fact that he's doing it at his home state school, he's called IU a dream job. He's called IU a dream job. So it would take a very lucrative offer, but it would also take the right offer, because I don't know if his vibe, his culture is this LEO principle, love each other. And I don't know if you can take that same principle and apply it to big blood corporate football programs, like an LSU or like the true top tier things where what all that matters is winning.
Yeah, love each other when you're winning.
Yeah, exactly.
That's exclusive.
Exactly.
Yeah. So he is an Indiana grad, right?
I know he did not go to IU, but his dad coached in the state. He was a high school football coach in the state.
Okay.
For 10 years at Ben Davis, just less than an hour up the road from Bloomington. I mean, he really knows Indiana like the palm of his hand. He grew up down in New Albany, coached at Ben Davis for 10 years, like I just said. He knows the state of Indiana, and that's why he's had a lot of success. He's put a lot of importance on recruiting the state of Indiana, but then also making the high schools in the area feel like football is important to Indiana and this state.
Good breakdown.
Now, Jeremy, I'm a hop in right now because I am a basketball fan. So we know the state of Indiana as a basketball state. How does it feel to have Indiana 4-0 right now? And is everyone talking about Indiana football or Indiana basketball? Like, what is the vibe out there in Indiana?
Well, we're talking football, man. It's a nice switch up, around this time, ironically enough, who the Hoosier basketball team is about to kick off with their Hoosier Hysteria. I believe it's this weekend, which starts their first, midnight practice. Normally there's 8,000 fans just to watch them shoot around in shorts and do a dunk contest. And, with COVID, they're not letting anyone in. They're doing it virtually this year. But I mean, it's a nice change of pace to be talking about football in the middle of football season, as where in the past, a lot of fans have been like, oh, when does basketball season start? It's like, guys, we're still playing football. Shut up about basketball. I love IU basketball, but when the football season ends, let's give football their credit until their season's done. So
that's awesome, nice right there.
Pace.
Well, Jeremy, we're just gonna switch over in gears, and we're just gonna go through the Indiana Ohio State matchup. So, with that being said, how big of a game is this against Ohio State, and how can this win, if you guys pull it off? How could it help the program moving forward?
Well, I mean, so a lot of the narrative so far has been, oh, Indiana beat Penn State, but yeah, they haven't won a game. Oh, they beat Michigan. They only beat Michigan State, or not Michigan State, Minnesota. So a lot of the narrative right now is we've beaten 4 teams that aren't very good. So if we were to pull off a win this weekend, it would show them that the IU program is for real. It's not just a happen of circumstance that Michigan is not a good football team this year, that Penn State is not a good football team this year. Michigan State's rebuilding. Ooh, congratulations, you beat Rutgers. It would give a nice little exclamation point behind the saying that the Hoosiers are undefeated, because they haven't just beaten, wishy-washy teams. It'd be a big deal for them to come out and beat Ohio State. They haven't beaten Ohio State since, I think it was since 1997 or 1992. So it's another one of those games
88
where they are, just aching for a win, We've gotten, the top 10 love here the last 2 weeks. This would be the real exclamation point, because we jump in the top 5 with a win over Ohio State.
No, you're a playoff team if you win this game.
Right. Yeah. Honestly, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so we dove into Michael Penix a little bit earlier about the expectations of him, with him being in the program. But what are some X factors going into this week's game? Could Stevie Scott be an X factor against Ohio State this week?
Well, the Hoosiers are going to need him to be, because if they expect to drop back 65 times and just pass the ball, that's not the recipe to beat Ohio State. They are going to have the threat of a running game. It's going to be on Stevie Scott, sophomore running back Samson James, who at one point was an Ohio State commit from the state of Indiana, who flipped his commitment in the process. So he has a lot to prove this week. He got a lot more action last week against Michigan State. So I have to think they're going to be doing a little bit more of running back by committee going forward, just to keep those guys fresh. Samson's got a little more juice in his first step. Stevie's a little bit bigger of a guy. He's going to be a little harder to tackle, but Samson's got a little more wiggle and burst to his game. So I think it'll be a nice 1-2 punch there. They also get David Ellis back. That's not a name you guys have heard so far, but he's been injured the first 3 weeks, played his first game last week. Didn't have a ton of catches, but he's a guy that really brings some speed to the backfield for the Hoosiers. So I definitely think the running game is going to have to produce some results, because they are going to have to keep the pressure off of Michael Penix in the offense.
Well, what you think if Indiana can get the running game going, would you think that will be a great asset to keep Justin Fields and the offense off the field? And, time of possession, you think Indiana will go that route, or will they try to, just like you said, sling it around with Michael Penix all game?
Well, I don't think much is going to change from an offensive game plan standpoint. They are going to stay aggressive. They are going to want to attack. That's worked well for them. But, I mean, really, the time of possession battle is a big thing that you bring up, because one thing you do by, the best player on the field is Justin Fields this weekend. Let's not, make any ifs, ands, buts about it. What's a great way to neutralize Justin Fields? Don't let him see the field very often. You make a great point there. If they can keep him on the sidelines, I think the Hoosiers are going to be in this to the very end. That's one thing I think the defense has a chance to do. They've stopped the run very well this year. They have a very aggressive secondary. They've got guys they have 3 guys in the secondary that have more than 2 interceptions this year. And that's one area where I think if Indiana can generate some turnovers, they're definitely going to stay in this ball game. Their capitalization off turnovers this year has been ridiculous. They have scored off of every turnover -1 outside of last week.
What do you think of Ohio State so far from what you've seen from them in 3 games? They obviously had last week off with Maryland being canceled, but what do you think so far?
Well, it's definitely been the Jordan Fields show. I was my brother-in-law is an Ohio State fan, so we talk Buckeyes a lot too. So one thing he was saying is, I wish they'd get the running game going a little bit more. I understand them wanting to get a little more consistent running game, but when you have a guy like Justin Fields out there, how often are you really going to take the ball out of his hands? He's got some decent weapons too. Garrett Wilson has been absolutely phenomenal this year. Big, long target who can really run and catch the ball. And then Chris Olave, he hasn't had quite the yardage that Wilson has, but he has 4 touchdowns this year. That, really stemming into last year, he's been their most consistent receiver. So they've got 2 very solid receivers. I'd say where Ohio State's kind of lacking is that third option in the passing game. Those 2 have been dominating the catches for the most part going forward. They've done a decent job alternating between in the running game, alternating between Trey Sermon, Master Teague. Those 2 have shared the bulk of the carries. They're both big guys who can make you pay when you don't get them down on first contact. Really what surprises me the most is that the Ohio State defense has given up yards at times, chunk plays. And part of that is, inexperience. When you have new guys stepping into roles, it takes a while to kind of get used to the system, get used to being a starter and bringing a certain level to the standard. One area where I think that's been very apparent this year is, with no one dominant edge rusher like they've had the past 2 years, the sacks have kind of come from all over the place. The one guy who's really stood out for them is defensive tackle Tommy Togai. He has 3 sacks. He is an absolute force on the interior. Absolute force on the interior. The Hoosiers are going to have their hands full with Tommy Togai. But then the rest of the sacks have been, one from Tuff Borland, one from Pete Warner, one from Damon Harrison at defensive end. There's another defensive tackle who I think has 2 whose name I'm missing, Baron Browning. They have a variety of guys who can come after the passer. No one's really standing out, but they can all do it.
So could you give our listeners the feel of how big of a game is this? Like, if Indiana pulls off the upset, is it the biggest win in program history, or do you think it will be diminished because of it's a COVID year? So could you give our listeners your take on that, Jeremy?
Well, this will be the biggest game that Indiana, if Indiana truly pulls off the upset, which I do think they can do, Bloomington will burn to the ground. It will definitely be the biggest game in program history if they pull off this win. This would be the win that says, screw the last 20 years of bad football. This program is here to stay, and we are here to win. Everyone else in America can say, oh, it's the COVID season. It's the COVID season. They won't care at all. They will take this win and bank it for years.
Well, and let me tell you, as someone who grew up watching Ohio State football, it feels very weird that Indiana's the top 10. This is the biggest game of the year for Ohio State right now. Yeah. Even Michigan, normally it's undoubtedly Michigan. There's no Wisconsin on the schedule. I think it's like they got Illinois after it's like Illinois, someone else. It's not really a hard road the rest of the way through.
Yeah, it's really not. It's really not. Yeah. Ohio State has a very clear-cut way to the playoffs, just as long as they don't manage to screw it up.
Yeah. And you can say the same for your Indiana Hoosiers. Real quick, give us a quick prediction because I want to hear what you actually think about that. You said they have a chance to win. They're still 20-point dogs, Jeremy. Yeah, there's no way. There's no way you're putting on those Indiana glasses and picking the Hoosiers, right?
I really want to.
Okay.
I really, really want to.
But
I will say this, though. Take Indiana and the points. Take Indiana and the points.
I'll give you that. 20 points. 20
Yeah,
points.
I think it'd be very foolish with how well the Hoosiers have played this year. I think IU's going to win by 21 because the Hoosiers have managed to force turnovers and capitalize on those turnovers. You just have to make Justin Fields make some turnovers.
I'm putting you on the spot. Give us a score.
Oh, boy. Score. I'm going to go Ohio State 38, IU 27.
Okay. That'd be a game.
I think it'll be a game all the way through. Ohio State will just get that one score late, which kind of leaves them in the driver's seat, and Indiana will do their damnedest to try to pull off that upset. But I just think Ohio State may be a little too much.
Sounds a lot like the Penn State game from the second game of the year for the Buckeyes. Very similar breakdown. All right, hey, let's move over. That's essentially the de facto semifinal, one semifinal in the Big Ten, because that's probably going to decide the East. The other one, let's go out west. Northwestern, Wisconsin. You got the 20, as bad as Northwestern was last year, and I think that's what people like to remember and talk about. They won the Big Ten West 2 years ago. They were the Big Ten West champs 2 years ago. So this is the Big Ten West champ of 2018 versus the Big Ten West champ in 2019. Who knows what the hell to think about Michigan right now. So I'm not sure how to properly value the absolute obliteration we witnessed in the Big House on Saturday night. But what do you look at? I mean, obviously this is a very solid Northwestern defense, but I would put Northwestern's schedule up there and say, I haven't seen you play a whole lot, except for the fact we've seen Maryland kind of explode after losing 45-3 on opening night. So this is an interesting matchup, and the game is not in Madison. So that's a big plus for Northwestern. It's in Evanston. So big plus for them. But how do you see this one shaking out? What do you think the key matchups are?
Well, I'm very familiar with Northwestern's quarterback. Peyton Ramsey was a Hoosier last year, led IU to one of their most memorable seasons in recent memory, which will probably go down as a top 10 season, in program history. So very familiar with Peyton Ramsey. He's just a gamer. You look at this guy and you don't think he's a Big Ten quarterback, but every single week he proves you wrong. He makes a throw on a matchup where he's got it. He puts the ball where it needs to go. He's never going to be a guy that wows you with his arm, but he's a gamer. He's a competitor. He leaves it all out there. Like you said, Northwestern's defense, not a lot of big names outside of Patty Fisher on that defense really, but they are young and they are fast and they fly to the ball. That's what really makes Northwestern's defense special. They just would play with relentless effort. Wisconsin, on the other hand, very much like normal Wisconsin teams we've seen, except Graham Mertz looks like a superstar out there at quarterback finally, which has kind of been the one area where Wisconsin's been really held back. And now it's like you're starting to see what an elite quarterback can do out in Madison. And that's just scary when a guy can, I think he started his college career going 18 for 18, 4 touchdowns, 220 some yards against Illinois. It made him look like he was going to win the Heisman, and then COVID happened. But I mean, Wisconsin's still a very solid football team, extremely well-coached defense by defensive coordinator Jim Leonard. I think this is going to be, a tough, physical, grinded out game, except I think Graham Mertz is going to be the difference. I think Wisconsin will win this game.
Wisconsin, Ohio State.
Give us a score. Give us a score, Jeremy, while we have you.
I'll go 30-20 Wisconsin Northwestern.
Wow. Not the defensive battle that I would expect to see, 30-27.
That is a defensive battle in college football anymore.
Definitely. If you watch that Wake Forest North Carolina game last week, that's definitely a defensive battle right there.
Dude, that looked like an ACC basketball score.
They were really playing basketball on grass out there. I tell you that.
Yeah.
But right. with that, we're gonna head out. We're gonna stay out west, and we're gonna talk about Minnesota and PJ Fleck. Like, what's going on with Minnesota? Can you dive in and tell us about that, Jeremy?
Well, the popular saying here in Indiana is that the boat has sprung a leak. But
Gotta get those shots in while you can.
but so honestly, the big surprise has been, Tanner Morgan's regressed a little bit. Rashad Bateman has really been the only receiving weapon he's had. Ottman Bell has done okay as a number 2, but even then he's only caught like 11 balls through 3 games. Like, that doesn't scream like capable number 2 receiver to me. Though the one bright spot out in Minnesota has been their offensive line in the play of running back Mohamed Ibrahim. He's got 7 touchdowns already through 3 or 4 games now. I mean, he has been their most consistent offensive piece for a team that I thought was going to be a little bit more of an offensive juggernaut with Rashad Bateman coming back. I thought Ottman Bell would have had a little bit more of an impact on the offense at this point. But I'd say the biggest thing is the defense has just been porous. Yeah, it's unbelievable that, just the loss of Carter Coughlin and Antoine Winfield can mean that much to a defense. Don't get me wrong. They're both great players, both got drafted and went off to the NFL. Shoot, Winfield starting for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this year. But, I mean, it's kind of appalling how bad defensively they've been when, the last 2 years, they haven't had a ton of huge names, but they've at least played hard and they've played with effort. And at times it seems like, man, what is going on out in Minnesota?
Are we just seeing the difference between a top level program who can reload? I mean, you even see it at Michigan and Penn State. Doesn't mean you hit every time. You're not going to hit every year. Sometimes it's about the right group of guys coming together and gelling at the right time. And somewhere like Minnesota, you might see it at Indiana too. Those gaps are going to be bigger. So when you hit that high, when you hit that one of your highs, when you lose those guys, it could be one of your lows again real quick. Is that an accurate take on the program, or is that something basically? I guess I'm just trying to figure out here. Should Gopher fans be worried or just stay patient? PJ will build it back up in the next couple of years. He'll be fine.
I'd tell them to be patient. They've got a very young and inexperienced team. It happens with a lot of young and experienced teams when these guys are just trying to get confidence in the way they played. And it just doesn't help that they haven't started off the year well either. You never know what would have happened at Indiana if they would have started off with 2 bad losses. Does the defense start hanging its head after a big run play or a big chunk play given up in the passing game? You see that in the pros sometimes, when it's like, they're coming and we can't stop it. Sometimes that level and attitude is just hard to overcome when you haven't played your best football. I think that's a big part of it. PJ Fleck can really recruit. Give him some time. He'll stop the leak in the boat, as I called it. Just give him time. He can really recruit. He just got to give him time. When his group of guys won 11 games last year, they had a lot of senior leadership there. Like you said, special group of guys came together and accomplished something truly special.
Mm-hmm.
I used to say the same thing about Northwestern. Used to be every 3 or 4 years, Northwestern would have this really impressive team that came out of nowhere. And you want to know why? Is because it was full of upperclassmen who knew their roles and knew what they could do. And then they'd have 2 years where it was like, oh, they just kind of middled through their schedule, didn't do anything too impressive because they had a lot of young guys coming into important roles. I think that's all that's happening in Minnesota right now.
Yeah, good comparison with Northwestern. All right, let's go over to another middling Big Ten West program right now. How do you view Nebraska's win over Penn State? Is it a positive step in the right direction, or is it just a win over a team having a bad year?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both. When you're Nebraska, you have to look at it as overcoming that next step because you finally made the switch at quarterback. You finally got Adrian Martinez out there, and Luke McCaffrey came in and led you to a victory. You saw the passing game kind of take off last week, which has been a big problem with Adrian Martinez. He just hasn't been consistent enough for the passing game to really be a difference maker. As where you saw him McCaffrey come in and do that. So I think the change at quarterback has helped that team. It's kind of gotten the boogeyman off the back. They finally got their first win. They looked a lot more competitive last week with him in the ball game. They just looked like a different team.
So the Huskers, they wrap up their season with Illinois, Iowa, Purdue, and Minnesota. I look at that and see a fairly winnable stretch. How are you seeing that?
I would agree. I think they have a chance where they could win 3 out of their last 4. I think it's more realistic that they win 2 out of their last 4, and finish up 3-5. But if you would look at that and combine it with a normal schedule of football, that probably means they're a 6-win team, based on, the non-conference foes that you play on a normal schedule. So, yeah, I mean, I think it was impossible for them to kind of exceed expectations again this year with the lack of a true off season, lack of practicing, and then the Big Ten saying that they were going to play, but then they weren't going to play. And then, a lot of teams have looked flat, coming out. Michigan's looked flat. They recruit 4-star, 5-star talent every year. They're a flat football team. It's just a matter of fact that some teams have looked very flat in this COVID football season.
Now, I know Scott Frost is a Nebraska guy, Jeremy, but do you see the program being patient with him moving forward if he, cannot rack up the wins? We've seen what he did at UCF, just on the recruiting trail and just, winning games. If he can't, bring that momentum over to Nebraska, do you think the program stays with Frost and be patient, or you think they look somewhere else?
I think they're going to stay with Frost. If anything, I think all their actions this offseason scream that Frost is going to be their guy until he absolutely proves that he can't. They went on that whole antic about, we're going to play football if the Big Ten doesn't play football. We're going to find a conference to go play in.
You're welcome for playing football, Indiana. Right. You're welcome for your 4-0 season on behalf of Nebraska for you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we kicked their butt this year too. But I don't think he's on the hot seat. Yeah, I think there might be some pressure for results. Absolutely. Nebraska used to be this big blue, football program that's really fallen off, but they do think Scott Frost can be the guy to turn that around. We have to remember he has not been there that long. He has not gotten his full recruitment classes in yet, to where it's totally his roster. I always say you have to judge a college coach in year 3 and year 4 more than you do in years 1 and years 2. Years 1 and years 2 are purging all the old talent that you don't want to stick around and filling it with your guys. Years 3 and 4, where your guys start taking off. That's where I think you find out the most about a college football coach. Yeah, like I said, COVID's been hell for all of us this year. It's definitely been hell for every head coach in America this year when it comes to football and trying to put together, a season when no one thought there might be one. So I would give Scott Frost the benefit of the doubt. I would say I would give him at least 3 more years if he were to continue down this road of just kind of middling success here and there. That's when I'd be more worried. I think this is year 3 for him. Year 3 now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Get 3.
So
he inherited a mess too.
So we're going to head over to Champaign, and I know Illinois is probably one of the teams, the doormat team of the Big Ten right now. But is there any bright spots within that Illinois program, from player personnel, coaching staff, anything? Do you see any bright spots coming out of that Illinois, program?
Yeah, definitely dark days in Champaign, Illinois. I would say the one bright spot is I do think they have a competitive defense. Might not look like it on the scoreboard, but that defense does play very hard. They're led by middle linebacker Jake Hansen. He truly plays the game like a middle linebacker. He, sticks his head into every tackle. Physical guy, can run, make tackles. He can cover a little bit. Really like his backup Tariq Barnes too when he's had an opportunity to play. he really brings the juice too, really gets after it. The defense is the one thing, that I'm not surprised about, though, is because Lovie Smith has always been a defensive-minded head coach. That's the one thing that I expected Illinois to do this year, was to be competitive on defense. We've all expected a little bit more from the Illini offense over the last few years. It just seems like they can't get anything going at quarterback. You bring Brandon Peters in, had a memorable game over Wisconsin last year. He's been injured for a lot of this year. So they've had I think it's Isaiah Williams is one of their backup quarterbacks / athletes on that team. He's he's the third leader on that team with almost 200 yards rushing. He's more athlete than he is quarterback. And Karan Taylor is too. I think that's the biggest problem, is they have never developed a passing game out in Illinois. I think that's the biggest problem. Even when they find a way to bring in a Josh Bebe from USC.
Now you speak on Lovie Smith being a defensive coach, Jeremy. Can you just talk about why hasn't the Tampa 2 defense worked on the college level like it has in the pros?
Well, one thing I will say is there's a lot bigger emphasis on the passing game in the college game than there is in the NFL. There are so many offenses in college that are designed to completely spread you out and attack every little zone that you don't cover or capitalize on the man-to-man matchup. Illinois has not been able to recruit to the level that they'd like to when it comes to getting the horses that they want to really run that Tampa 2 style defense, that Lovie Smith was famous for when he was with the Bears. They can't get pressure with just 4. That's the other big part of the Tampa 2 is to rush 4 and drop 7. Problem is they can't get pressure with 4. So it leaves guys exposed that shouldn't be out in coverage that long. They have to bring a Jake Hansen on a blitz, a Tariq Barnes on the blitz just to generate pressure. I kind of said the same thing about IU. They don't have any particular guy standing out on their defensive line, but they scheme their way into getting pressure. That's one thing Illinois absolutely relies on in order to get pressure, to try to just stay competitive in these games, just to try to get the quarterback to make a mistake. I'd say that's the biggest problem with their defense right now, is they can't generate pressure. They're a decent run defending football team, but they can't get after the quarterback at all. He's just sitting back there all day long. I mean, I can complete passes when I don't have to move in the pocket,
Illinois' defense can't get pressure with the front 4. So therefore, that Tampa 2 defense really doesn't hold up. But moving on, we're going to head out to Iowa. The big question that we have for you is any chance that, Kirk Ferentz get replaced? I know it's a lot of talk within that program, not, good talk about, just football stuff, but off the field stuff as well. So do you see Kirk Ferentz being replaced within the next couple seasons, or immediately for that matter?
Yeah, that's kind of the black cloud that's hanging over the Iowa Hawkeyes right now. They have managed to win their last 2 by finally going back to the run game, which is something they've always been good at, with Goodson at running back. The other running back's name I can't remember at the moment, but they've managed to finally start to run the ball, which has always been their bread and butter out there, which has been their offensive identity for years. Yeah, they have a Nate Stanley every now and then who can help out in the passing game, but they've always been a running game. They've always had a good defense. They recruit virtually the same player every year and plug them exactly in where they're supposed to go. That's literally a team that has been able to plug and replace linebackers, defensive linemen, secondary. Not a lot of top tier names, but they're all very good guys who produce at a Big Ten level. But I think the off the field stuff is where most Iowa fans are concerned, and just around the country is concerned with just everything that's coming out about how the culture there has not been conducive for, especially African-American players who have come out and said, oh, we've had to, we can't have dreadlocks. We can't have tattoos. We can't be ourselves at Iowa. I do think there could be some traction there. One thing I will say is that Ferenc has been there for so long. It'll be interesting to see how willing they're going to let their God walk out of Iowa, so to say. He is the one who turned that program around. He's been there for over 30 years, most winningest head coach at that school, has broken tons of Big Ten records at that school. But the question is, in today's society, does a guy like Kirk Ferentz stick around? Kirk Ferentz could go off and retire anytime, and this will all get swept under the rug. That's how this type of stuff is. I feel like he could retire tomorrow, and he'll be, he retired because he was done with football, not because of the offseason stuff. That happens in a lot of things. We sweep the bad stuff under the rug and choose to remember the good times. That is what will happen if he is truly let go or he resigns at the end of the year. We're all going to remember, this, like I mentioned, this black cloud for a little bit. But when you really think about all the years at Iowa, that's what you're going to remember about. You're going to remember about the running backs, the NFL talent that's come out of Iowa. You're going to remember most of the good things. And then that little footnote at the end is going to say, well, he might not have always done it the right way.
Yeah, it may not be totally tenure defining. However, do you think it's right now in the day where we are with our climate right now in general, I got to think this is an issue that might be enough to push him out the door in Iowa City. Do you agree with that?
I do agree with that. I do. Just with the way, as a society we are today, we care about social justice movements. This is not something that's going to go away for him soon. It's going to linger there. Other teams are going to use this against him when it comes to recruiting. They may not say it publicly, but they will definitely do it behind closed doors. No one says they will negatively recruit. Yeah, until you get him in the front, until the coach next door gets him off and says, well, you never know. Kirk Ferentz might not be there that long. Oh, the culture's not that great there. So, no, I definitely think you have a point there. I think this could be his last year. If it isn't, he probably only has another year or two, honestly, before he's probably ready to hang it up at this point. He's had a long and storied career at Iowa. He can leave at any time he wants. He can leave anytime he wants. I think the real question will be, is he going to have to leave before he wants to?
All right, let's go out east. All right. I've been really impressed with the quick progression of, as we call him on the podcast, Baby Tua. But that's mostly because we're struggling to say Taulia, I believe. Taulia. But we call him Baby Tua on the podcast. And the Terps, after the 45-3 opener against Northwestern, we were having a conversation on here is, Mike Loxley did not have a good tenure at New Mexico. Famously did not have a good tenure at New Mexico. He went to the Nick Saban rehab for coaches and got his name back and everything. He's well known for recruiting that DMV. He's got some talent. I went back and watched that Maryland Penn State game, and they had a couple players. Those Maryland had better athletes on the field than Penn State. That was pretty incredible. It was pretty incredible to watch. So they're definitely coming along, I think. But are you surprised at just how quickly it went from week one to like boom, all of a sudden something clicked and they're just kind of crushing it on the offensive side of the ball? I was bummed out that Ohio State game was canceled last week. I was looking forward to watching that.
Yeah, I was too. I was quite surprised, honestly, with the massive leap, from getting totally pummeled in week one to all of a sudden looking like the third most explosive team in all of the Big Ten.
It's like the bizarro Mississippi State.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Wow, what a
polar opposite.
They've had.
Like the total opposite. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Total opposite on that one, Nick.
But yeah, Nick, you bring up this great point. Mike Loxley, last year he recruited well. Right. He's always been known for recruiting well, especially in that area of the country. It seems like just he's playing his athletes this year and letting them grow into roles. Baby Tua has come over. He's made a big difference. He's finally, Maryland finally looks like they have a quarterback that can do everything. In the past they had, Ty Pigram, who's now Western Kentucky. He's primarily a runner, not a thrower. Or you've had a primarily a passer and not a runner. Baby Tua can do it all. That really changes an offense and everything they can do. He can extend the plays and find playmakers when even the play breaks down. He's done that a few times this year. But, yeah, they are just more explosive on offense this year.
What's their ceiling in the East?
That's tough. That's tough in a year.
Let's be honest, it's probably not winning it. That's probably not the ceiling for them.
Probably
a dream year, maybe, but
yeah. Most people would say that about Indiana too, and they're looking like one of the best teams in the Big Ten right now. So I don't know. I think they can challenge Penn State for the foreseeable future. I don't think Michigan is going to magically turn it around here unless they get a bona fide quarterback or finally figure out what they want to do.
Right.
That's the difference. Quarterbacks lead these teams. Maryland has its quarterback for the future. Indiana has its quarterback for the future. Clifford has not looked good at Penn State this year. Mm-hmm. Joe Milton has definitely not looked good at Michigan. I think Maryland could realistically challenge to be a top 3 team the next 2 years.
Just Ohio State, Indiana, and Maryland duking it out for Big Ten East supremacy.
Right. Who would have thought?
Every year.
But no, you're right about that, Jeremy. And it really seems like, Loxley and Maryland has their quarterback for the future. And, me and Nick on this show, we talk about us being Gators fans. So we know about that quarterback position. Mm-hmm. So if you have your quarterback locked up, you can do some damage. And that's clearly what Maryland is doing within the Big Ten right now. But I would just like to flip gears and talk about, this Rutgers program under Graciano. Do you see Graciano being the Big Ten Coach of the Year this year?
No, I don't. I see Tom Allen in Bloomington being Coach of the Year because he's probably going to end up going 7-1. I really only think Ohio State and Wisconsin are going to be the only 2 teams that challenge IU the rest of the way, in all honesty.
It's probably a good call.
Not discounting what Greg Schiano has brought to Rutgers this year. They are fighting. They look like a much improved team over a short period of time. Outside of a, big loss in week 1, or I'm sorry, not a big loss in week 1.
They lost big to Ohio State.
Yeah. Thank you.
But even then, they're just throwing trick plays out. They're doing throwback. It was awesome. It was fun. They were fun to watch.
Right. And that's one thing Rutgers has done this year, though. They are competing, as where in years past, they've just been going out there and playing. They've been going through the motions the last few years. Schiano, you can already tell Schiano has brought a difference to that locker room. They are truly playing their hearts out for him. Rutgers is no longer going to continue to be a doormat. He is already recruiting well. He brought over a ton of transfers this year. With they haven't all gelled together, but they're in all honesty, since no one's losing any eligibility this year, they could all theoretically be back next year. So it's like he could have a team of veteran starters next year. You never know. But he's had success where most places he's gone outside of being with the Buccaneers. He can recruit, as well as anyone. Being at Ohio State, he knows what it takes to win. He's going to have that program competing. He just happens to be in one of the best conferences in football traditionally when it comes to Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Michigan State. And now with Indiana and Maryland both looking like they're going to, flip on the switch for the long haul, it's going to be very tough for him to win there. But I think he can.
Yeah, I think we're looking at a team that could be fighting for bowl eligibility on a regular basis in the next few years. Mm-hmm. Like nothing, I don't see them pulling a 4-0 start and having a surprise top 10 matchup with Ohio State anytime soon, but I could definitely see them getting back into the bowl swing like they were under him for the most part. So the first go around, let's flip to another team that's rebuilding here, Michigan State. The week 1 Rutgers loss was just astonishing a little bit, but then you saw it was upended by an even more astonishing result by going to beat Michigan in week 2. It appeared, and now all of a sudden it's like, well, maybe that wasn't so surprising. And we're going to save Michigan for the end. They're going to be our dessert here tonight, guys. We'll get to Michigan, but with Michigan State, Mel Tucker, I personally love the hire. I thought that was kind of an out of the box hire for them. I didn't see him leaving Colorado. I thought that was a great hire by Colorado a couple years ago. You got a guy with NFL experience, coach under Saban, he's coached under Kirby. He's done pretty well wherever he's been, and so he's been around that elite recruiting. With Michigan in a bit of a tizzy, do you see him like really being able to build this thing up quickly at Michigan State? Because this Michigan State team, it's kind of predictable what they are this year because we've seen this kind of going on that downward slow, and even I've seen enough of Rocky Lombardi even last year to know that that wasn't going to be probably an awesome situation this year. But I mean, he sure looked good in Ann Arbor. But what's in the store? What type of rebuild, if you're a Michigan State fan, do you need to wrap your head around? Like, is this going to be a 2 to 3 year deal? Because the one question I do have about Mel Tucker, I have no doubt that Michigan State's going to have a kick-ass defense like they did with D'Antonio, and they're going to get ball players on that side of the ball. I don't know if he's Will Muschamp though. I don't know if it's going to what's his offense like. I don't know. It's a genuine question. So what are we looking at for a rebuild in East Lansing?
I mean, I definitely think it's a 2 to 3 year rebuild. I mean, look at the quarterbacks they have right now. I mean, neither one of them are exactly inspiring confidence for the immediate future,
to say the least.
I think, I kind of said it earlier, when judging a new head coach, you can't really judge them a whole lot in year 1 and year 2 because you're trying to kind of get rid of the holdovers and you're trying to bring in your guys. I have no doubt that he's going to recruit well. Being in the NFL for years, working under Nick Saban, he knows how to recruit and he knows how to get the top recruits. Let's not forget that Michigan State just 4 years ago was perennially a top 3 team in the Big Ten every year. It's not like they're so far gone from grace. Yeah, their fall from grace has not been great, but they're definitely a team that has winning tradition there. That's something that he doesn't have to combat. Yeah, they've had a few rough years, that he can lean back on all the players that D'Antonio has got sent off to the NFL, how they've recruited NFL players. I have no doubt in 2 or 3 years, people are going to be like, wow, that Mel Tucker's really turned it around in Michigan State. All it takes is a few players to really start making a difference. The biggest one that can make the most immediate difference is to get a high caliber quarterback. I know he's going to be able to recruit a high caliber quarterback to Michigan State. That's another position where they put quarterbacks in the league. Brian Hoyer has had a long NFL career. He might not be the greatest, but he's been there. Kirk Cousins, Brian Lewerke is still on a team out there. I'm struggling to think of the other Michigan State quarterback.
Nick Foles.
Huh?
Nick Foles.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I was actually thinking Connor Cook.
Connor Cook. That didn't work out too well in the NFL.
No, but they've all gotten their shot at the NFL.
True.
This is the Big Ten. Big Ten produces NFL talent. When you play the type of schedule you do, especially in the Big Ten East, when you play Ohio State and Michigan, what's going to be Indiana, what's going to be Maryland, Penn State, you face the gauntlet in the Big Ten East a lot. So especially going forward. But I just think it'll be 2 or 3 years. It takes time for a new coach to come in, install a new offense, install some tweaks on defense, new schemes, new coaches across the board. It's going to take time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in on this one, Jeremy. I know one of the knocks on this Michigan State program for years has been, the skill position, the skill players. They've always had a stout defense. They've always, I've always been a fan of, D'Antonio because I always thought he did the most with the least. And I think that's a sign of a great coach. But do you see Mel Tucker actually getting in those athletes that you see at Ohio State or you see at Alabama? If he can get those athletes in there, do you think, they kind of run the table within that division?
I don't know if they're ever going to run the table because it's such a tight division. But, I mean, Michigan is a hotbed for recruits. I mean, Indiana has been recruiting Michigan harder these past few years. Michigan has always managed to keep the Michigan guys. Maybe this is the year Mel Tucker finally steals some 4-stars from, Jim Harbaugh and the Wolverines to kind of even up the disparity there. I understand, Michigan State's had a lot of success in the past with, just grabbing, the 3-star guys that no one, hears about, but Mel Tucker is going to be able to get some true playmakers there. I have no doubt about it on both sides of the ball. Just leaning on his experience and where he's been, he can sell them on a future that's very bright in East Lansing.
Yeah. I think he will. Just like we all said earlier, he's a great recruiter. I definitely think he's in that Loxley, caliber of a recruit, Graciano. So he would definitely turn that program around and get those athletes in there. But let's go out and talk about Penn State and James Franklin. It's been some rumors out there that, he's been kind of like on the hot seat here and there. So do you see him potentially moving on, or you think, that Penn State, boosters in the fan base kind of rally around him?
I think they're going to rally around him. Yeah, he's had a rough year. Micah Parsons, isn't playing on that defense. That's the guy who he was counting on to lead that defense. Yeah, he's definitely been expecting better out of the Penn State offense, but he doesn't have Journey Brown. Sad that he's had to medically retire because of a heart condition. I mean, that was meant to be a huge portion of that offense this year. I mean, people thought he was going to be one of the best running backs in the entire college football landscape. That's a guy that he, will never have again. Just in general, a lot of guys have had to step up this year. And that's another team that's been a little, is suffering from the inexperience bug in a year where you didn't have a traditional offseason, no traditional offseason practices, only about a month and a half of a fall football camp just to put it on hold. Then to throw another month of football together about 3 weeks later. It's been an inconsistent offseason for them, just like it has been everyone else. I do think it's been surprising that they have not won a game yet. I would have thought they would have at least won something at this point. They're another team, just like Michigan. They recruit 4-stars and 5-star guys year in and year out. So it's not like there is not talent there. It's just they're not finding ways to put it together this year.
He's had enough good seasons where I think he's got plenty of cushion there. But I guess one thing that I found odd, and I guess I watched it closer to home a couple of years ago, where all of a sudden Jimbo Fisher's name was kind of popping up with the LSU job. A little bit rumor here, a little bit of rumor there. And James Franklin's been doing that the last couple off seasons. We've heard about Florida State and James Franklin. We've heard about USC and James Franklin. Like, even I've heard South Carolina already with him. If his name is out there that much, I have to think it's his agent putting it out there to some extent. A lot of it's rumors, a lot of it's that. But if his name is really out there to the degree which it is, gotta think it's coming from a little bit of the internal camp, just a total speculation. But at what point do you think that this will wear thin with Penn State? I mean, this can work when you're winning and you're Jimbo Fisher and you're winning ACC titles, but when you have a rough year like this, and then these type of negotiations, and your name keeps popping up every year, do you think that's going to have a negative impact on his time at Penn State? Do you see his marriage coming to end anytime soon, or do you think like maybe he reads the room and goes, I'm a mile behind Ohio State? Maybe maybe not South Carolina, but maybe USC looks pretty good in about a year.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting thought. I mean, before this year, I would have said he would have had one of the, top 10 safest jobs in all of college football, because he's had Penn State competing for, the Big Ten East title every year. Yeah, he's had one bad year here where, truly atrocious year out in Happy Valley. But I ultimately think he's going to stay at Penn State unless he wants to leave. That, like you said, that would be the one thing that would, make me think that, okay, maybe he is entertaining a South Carolina job where he can go challenge in the SEC East rather than the Big Ten East, where it's always going to be a challenge to win that. He's going to have to play Florida But outside of Florida, the SEC East isn't super loaded.
Georgia.
Well, yeah, in Georgia. Don't get me wrong. But so, for example, like you just said, he's always going to have two top programs to compete with. Whether he stays in the Big Ten East, the SEC East, no matter where he goes. I mean, he's managed to recruit very well at Penn State. He's been winning at Penn State. Yeah, the one this year sucks. It really does. But I don't see him moving on unless he wants to move on and try something else.
I'm just curious why his name keeps coming up, though. Because if he's happy there, and unless it's just strictly all business, let's get a few more bucks in the bank. Let's show them that I'm willing to leave. If it's a game, then it's a game. But I find it odd because you think that's a great marriage
odd.
with Penn State. It's a little weird, right?
It is odd because he just signed a big offseason deal with Penn State just this last year,
Yeah.
I think. I mean, huge deal.
So it's working.
That's supposed to keep him at Penn State for a long time.
Yeah, so the tactics are working. The agent got a raise. Hey, let's it's time. We've been putting it off enough. Let's have the Jim Harbaugh talk. All right. And obviously the talk is, should he stay? Should he go? But if you're on the go side, I don't want this weak ass Luke Fickell, Urban Meyer stuff. Okay. Because Luke Fickell's a Buckeye through and through, and I'll hear none of that of him coaching in Ann Arbor. I will hear none of that. That is so lazy. People don't do their research. That he's 100% not going to take the Michigan job. I know nothing about the man, and I'll be willing to say that right now, that he is not taking a Michigan job. But you can make an argument. The thing that's so interesting about Jim Harbaugh to me is you can really spin this 100 different ways and have a point either way. You could say he's not come through. He was hired to win big. He's paid like Nick Saban. He hasn't won like that. On the other hand, you could say, well, in 2 of his 5 full seasons there, he's in year 6 right now, but 2 of his full 5 seasons, he's an Ohio State win away from virtually, going to the Big Ten title game and virtually being in the playoffs. So that's not bad, especially when you consider Michigan was pretty terrible when he took over, and he's consistently had them in the top 15. I mean, this Indiana loss is one of the first losses you could really point to with him and say that he doesn't have a lot of those losses where it just should win and he loses. It's the 50-50 games where he's been terrible and everything. So there's plenty justifiably to gripe about with Harbaugh. And I'll let you have the floor, Jeremy, but what I want to know is find me a coach who's that Michigan snobby. They like the whole Michigan man culture. They love Bo. They love Bo Schembechler. And by the way, Bo Schembechler, if you ever read about the guy or you learn about the guy, if you were in that cult, if you were in the Michigan cult, you would buy in 100% on that guy too, because Bo Schembechler is the man. I love Bo. I love all the cheesy Michigan man stuff. And I get it. I really do get it with Michigan. But at some point, you either got to stop making it all about that and embrace the 21st century with something new, or you stick with your guy Harbaugh and just give him more time. Because I'll tell you what, the last few years, I feel like he's trying to adapt on offense and trying to adapt, and he just hasn't fully committed. Like it was like kind of like Saban had to transition from Jalen Hurts to Tua before we're going to throw the ball. Jalen Hurts still ran the ball a lot. Tua was the passing guy. Jalen Hurts still ran the ball a lot. Harbaugh has tried to make that slow transition, but there's no Tua waiting to take over. So it's been like this like amorphous, like non-defined. Like, how would you define the Michigan offense the last 3 years? Besides bad.
Well, I define them as an offense without an identity.
Yeah, exactly.
They want to do one thing and do the exact opposite. Yeah. So when Harbaugh got there, they were going to be this really physical running team. And now we've got Josh Gaddis, an offensive coordinator, who wants to spread it out every play. There's got to be a median somewhere where those two cultures can come together. But it hasn't happened. It just hasn't happened. A lot of it comes down to their quarterback play. They need a guy who can, be that classic pocket passer, but then also extend plays. Joe Milton, to an extent, looks like a guy who could do that. Hasn't put it together yet, though. He's still a young player. But in my opinion, I think there's always going to be trouble up in Ann Arbor until they really kind of marry this whole offensive culture problem together. Because on defense, they've always been fast, physical, flying around. That has not been the case on offense. They need to find one scheme they can all get behind and do that in Michigan.
But what's the number one problem if you're in Michigan? If you're running the Michigan program tomorrow, I'm putting you in charge of Michigan. What is your number one problem at Michigan? I'll give you a hint. It's down south. It's Ohio State. You got to beat Ohio State. What do you have to do to beat Ohio State? You got to get a big offense going, right? You got to have that offense that can explode when Ohio State goes off and is just crushing you, and you can't stop them on defense, even though you have the number one defense in the Big Ten because you did a great job shutting down Wisconsin 3 weeks ago. Like, Ohio State plays on the offensive side of the ball like not many other teams in the Big Ten. And you got to be ready to go for that. And that's why I don't understand why they can't commit to that. Open it up.
It's just in this internal struggle of Harbaugh wanting this physical culture, but the offense not going to it, you know. But there's too much in between. There's too much in between. You've got to find a guy who can do what Wisconsin is doing this year. Have a physical offense, but get a big-time quarterback behind it and put some real threats on the outside. I think that's what's going to work in Michigan.
Rob, you watch a lot of Urban Meyer football. Didn't Urban Meyer stress physicality? I feel like Urban Meyer's style of football is underrated for how physical it was, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Wouldn't you agree, Rob?
I would definitely agree with that. You hit the nail on the head with that one, Nick, about, the physicality on both sides of the ball. And that's the thing that surprised me about this Michigan team, because it really seemed like, the backbone of the team has kind of been the defense, since Harbaugh kind of took over. But, the last couple of seasons, you kind of see that sliding away. And it's not for lack of talent, because they're recruiting very well. Just like I know that, Harbaugh and Michigan comes back into my hometown in New Jersey and recruit all the guys out of here.
Jabril Peppers, Rashawn Gary. So, the list goes on. So we've seen, Harbaugh on the recruiting trail, and he's having, top 10 recruiting classes. So it's not a lack of talent. So it's definitely something within that program. I don't know if it's on the coaching side or, the players are just not motivated enough, but it's something that has to be fixed within that program in order for Harbaugh to kind of, go to the college football playoffs and win that big one. So fix Michigan, Jeremy. What do we got to do here? What's the tool? Do you stick with Harbaugh? Number one question, do you stick with Harbaugh?
It's tough because I think you do, because I just don't know if there's a more quote unquote Michigan man than Jim Harbaugh. Like, he is the guy up there. That's what they brought him up there to be. He is Michigan football with, he played there, he coaches there. He does it all for that program. The other thing is, I don't really know who you're going to bring to replace Jim Harbaugh,
right,
and expect better results than what they're currently getting.
Let's go over the last two. Rich Rodriguez was the hottest coach in America, almost hired by Alabama before Nick Saban, right? So hottest coach in America. You tried that route. You ran him out of town because you said he doesn't understand what being a Michigan man's about. He doesn't understand us or our traditions or respect. He didn't respect the number one goes to the wide receiver. He made all these different rules. You tried bringing a Michigan man home. Brady Hoke, coach under Lloyd Carr. He understood the program. Nice guy, good dude. But it was a little quirky, I think. Is that fair to say? For, didn't wear the headphones on offense, like what, stuff, easy stuff to point at and poke at with him. He couldn't win the big one either. That was a knock on him. That's right. So you bring Harbaugh in, who big coach, hottest coach on the market, Michigan man. It was the perfect marriage. But like, where do you go for? Like, are you being patient if you're in charge of that program right now? Forgetting. Obviously there's financial considerations here, but let's forget finances and just go strictly the direction of the program. I'm with you. Who are you going to bring in? Matt Campbell? Hey, by the way, he lost to Louisiana to start the season. He's not perfect. Like, I mean, there's no, like, I don't know who you're talking about bringing in that's going to put you on a higher profile than Jim Harbaugh, that's going to recruit better than him. I mean, the only thing you got to say is, like, dude, like, you got to figure out this, make a decision on offense. Like, stop with this Stanford, like, 2007 stuff and start,
Right.
Yeah, start, like, spread it out and get ready to beat Ohio State. But that's what Gaddis was supposed to be, right?
I mean, theoretically, that is what he's supposed to be. You know, he's not out of there yet. If the offense continues to struggle, he won't be there that much longer. Like I said, you've got to find an offensive identity, one you're truly committed to. Just because I still feel like that's the problem. You've got some guys who are not fitted for Gaddis' system that are trying to play Gaddis football right now, that are more suited for the Jim Harbaugh Stanford offense, you know, which he wanted to run when he first got to Michigan. He wanted to run it down everyone's throats, make them pay, you know, bring in that extra tight end, you know, have like 3 tight ends that can all go out and catch the ball and make you pay when you are least expecting it. They've got to find it. They've got to find a middle ground. They've got to find a middle ground. They are never going to be a true shotgun football team unless they truly bring on this complete offensive overhaul. Because the other thing that they're missing right now is the offensive linemen. The offensive linemen are still getting recruited. They're as these big, powerful, massive guys. When you're a shotgun team, you don't need the biggest or the strongest. You need the most athletic.
Yeah.
You know, that they recruit great offensive linemen because they do put them in the league. I'll give them that. But even there's got to be a middle ground because it feels like they're recruiting for one thing and doing another.
All right, so if you're running the program, are you holding Harbaugh or are you making a move?
No, I'm holding Harbaugh. I'm making a change in offense, though.
What about you, Rob?
For the time being, I'm holding on to Harbaugh. But to Jeremy's point, it just seems like, you know, they're recruiting these guys and they want to do one thing, but they do something else. For example, we always talk about Donovan Peoples-Jones. If you look at his combine numbers, the guy was a freak. But, you know, excuse me, but Michigan and John Harbaugh didn't use him in that system, you know, very well. I mean, part of that, they really didn't have a quarterback that they could count on. That was probably the part of it with Shea Patterson back there. It just seemed, honestly, if you ask me, it just seems like Shea Patterson played better within the Ole Miss offense than he did when he came to Michigan. And that's what the point that you were trying to make, Nick, that's the reason why, you know, Harbaugh brought in Shea Patterson to kind of open up the offense, but it really didn't help. So something is missing. So, you know, just like we talked about Gaddis, like, I don't think he's going to be there if this offense doesn't, you know, kick up within the remainder of the year. But Harbaugh is definitely going to have to bring someone in to kind of, you know, overhaul that offensive unit.
But he's probably, in fairness to Gaddis, he's probably going to go in the direction of someone like Gaddis. And also, if you're Josh Gaddis, let's be real. Do we really think Josh Gaddis has had the full go of it? Or do you think Jim Harbaugh has been a little bit stingy in turning over the control completely?
Well, when there's contention, there's probably some truth to that. So,
yeah,
you know, there probably is some truth to that. But, I mean, Harbaugh should not be calling plays right now. He needs to find a way to get his team just to play week in and week out.
Yeah, yeah. And then just let all the reports say they're going to hire Luke Fickell to be the defensive coordinator. Urban Meyer will be the offensive coordinator. And then everything will be fixed, right? Like, I'm so tired. I can't tell you. The Urban Meyer rumors are just killing me for every opening. It's like the new John Gruden. For like every single opening, it's like, oh, what about Urban Meyer? It's like, yeah, what about Urban Meyer? Obviously, if you have a chance to get Urban Meyer, go get Urban Meyer by all means. But it's maddening to see how many, like, every single job's tied to Urban Meyer. It's hilarious.
And for good reasons, Nick. I tell you
Obviously.
what, Urban Meyer is probably one of the few coaches that can come into any program and kind of turn it around.
National title.
he's shown that on, many different levels. So I think Urban Meyer and the name surrounding Urban Meyer's name surrounding, multiple programs is always a good thing. But I think Urban Meyer is definitely done with that.
Of course, but I want to live in $1 million home, but I live in an apartment right now. So it's like, there's there's always things we want. There's always things we want that you're not going to get. So I don't know. It's just, I think if you're Texas or USC or someone like that, you can talk about it, but it's every job opportunity. And the Fickle's a Buckeye. He ain't going to Michigan. That ain't happening.
Well, and then I think the other thing behind that is, does Michigan really want to bring in an OSU guy? No, they don't.
Although
really
they didn't have a
wanna do
problem
that.
bringing in a Woody Hayes disciple and Bo Schembechler.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, Woody Hayes disciple.
Even if it's what they should do, they won't.
Yeah.
Because, no, seriously, a friend of mine and I have had this conversation about Harbaugh for the past few years, how we don't think he's a good coach. Oh, could he be on the way out? And this year we keep joking that, Michigan needs to make an Ohio State-like move. They need to stop trying to be Michigan. They need to start trying to emulate Ohio State more often.
Yeah. And that's honestly what I'm saying, because it's why John Cooper got fired at Ohio State. I'm going to take you guys back 20 years, but John Cooper was almost exactly what Harbaugh is at Michigan. He was really good coach, had the team in the top 10, top 15 regularly, competed like close to national championship status for most of the season, and then would lose to Michigan, lose the bowl game. And it was heartbreaking every single year. And there's only so many times you could take that as a fan base. But at the same time, Michigan, you were kind of out in the wilderness, and Harbaugh brought you back. I wrote an article on this last week, which is why I'm going on and on about it, because I have all the information in my head still. But Harbaugh's basically got the same win percentage as he's in the ballpark of Bo, Gary Moeller, Lloyd Carr. They're all in the same ballpark. I mean, this is not a disaster. Like, anyone who calls it a total disaster in Ann Arbor has short-term memory, because Rich Rod was a disaster. That was a disaster. Yeah. Brady Hoke was disappointing. I have a hard time calling him a disaster, but he was disappointing. But Harbaugh has just been like, you know what it is? The lesson you can learn from watching, if you just stop time today and say, what's your lesson from the Jim Harbaugh era at Michigan? Man, don't overpromise and underdeliver. Like, maybe we didn't need to see him take a dump with the Pope. Like, we had to, every move of his was monitored for the entire first 2 years of his regime at Michigan. Oh, hey guys, Jim Harbaugh took his shirt off. Like, we got a little over Harbaugh early on. Yeah. He just kind of jumped to that status when he came back to Michigan without having to, he wasn't winning national titles like Dabo or Nick Saban yet. So
I think he played into that though, Nick.
Oh,
I mean,
sure.
And that was the thing. If Harbaugh was kind of like, you know what, I'm just gonna sit back and I'm just gonna let the play talk for itself, that would have been one thing. But he kind of took it and ran with it.
Absolutely.
So I think a lot of the flack that Harbaugh is catching right now, he kind of brought on himself, and he's not winning games. And one thing that kind of covers up everything is winning games, and he's not doing that right now. So I think that's kind of why everyone as a whole is jumping on, Harbaugh in that Michigan program right now.
He definitely, for the amount of money he gets paid, he deserves to hear every word of criticism. I'm just saying, you're talking about firing him. Who are you bringing in? Are you bringing in Will Muschamp's available now? He's available.
Yeah.
Who are you bringing in?
We've seen how he's gone at every job he's ever taken.
That was a joke. That was a joke. Yeah. But at any rate, I just, that's all I got on Harbaugh. You guys got anything to add on the Michigan job?
Yeah, I mean, you make a great point. If you fire Harbaugh, or something happens, like, who are you going to bring in?
James Franklin.
I think no. I don't see James Franklin making that move to Michigan. Nope. But just like you said, it's a middle ground. You kind of have to have a middle ground, whether we want to bring in a Michigan guy or, someone who's familiar with the culture of Michigan? Or do we want to bring in a coach that we're just going to give him the reins and let him run the program how he wants to run the program, as long as he's getting the results that we need? So I think, that's the seesaw battle that's going around Ann Arbor right now.
The only thing I would say is the only acceptable solution for me as a Michigan fan would be we're hiring Tom Allen and we're bringing Penix in as a grad transfer quarterback next year. Fixes every problem you have. Right, Jeremy?
Yeah, no, I don't think so, guys. I'm not going to go for it.
Jeremy's not going for that one, Nick. Indiana guy's not going for that one.
No.
I mean, they're honestly, guys. I mean, they're starting to recruit almost just as well as Michigan. They don't bring in the 4 or 5 star guys, but they are doing just as well as they're doing just as good as Michigan State was a few years ago about developing the unheralded recruits who are playing their tails off, who are making a difference out on the football field. You look at IU's defense right now. I don't think you will sign a single 4-star guy on the defensive side of the ball. If you do, that's because he's sitting behind someone else right now. Almost everyone on that defense, they could have been highly recruited, but they weren't 4-star or 5-star guys. They were the highly coveted 3-star guys. Guys like Tiawan Mullen, he was highly sought after. NFL bloodlines, world-dropping athleticism. Reese Taylor was a quarterback at Ben Davis in Indianapolis. There was a great article out of the Indy Star, I think it was a week ago, saying how if he knew that if he was going to get to the NFL, he knew he was going to have to make a position change, and Tom Allen said cornerback is the place to do it. They have managed to recruit these great athletes and found great places for them on offense. Jamar Johnson and the only guy who could be a 4-star is Devon Matthews at strong safety for the Hoosiers. He was very highly sought after, almost signed with Florida State, signed with Indiana. He has really started to come on this year. Play like the guy I thought he could be. I felt like everyone last year was just playing a step too slow. And that's where everyone this year is playing super fast. And the leap in confidence in this team is just ridiculous.
Story old as time. Indiana beating out Florida State for recruits. Just another day in college football.
Right. Hey, Michael Penix's dad wanted him to sign with Florida State.
Oh, they're cool. They got quarterbacks. They're fine. They're fine on quarterbacks, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They got a bunch of them.
Yeah. Jeremy Pruitt's really happy about letting Michael Penix go when he got there.
He was a Tennessee commit, right?
He was committed to Tennessee. And what happened was when Pruitt got there, he told him his scholarship was good. Week and a half later, it wasn't. Go find somewhere else, kid.
Hey, it's just another team with quarterback wealth. You can't have them all, baby. Tennessee, you got some great quarterbacks there. You got Jared Garantano for life. Enjoy that. That's a Jersey kid, Rob. Why don't you brag on him?
Bergen Catholic guy, big strong kid, tough, but once again, just can't get it going at Tennessee.
I'm just saying, I didn't hear you piping up about New Jersey when his name came up.
For great reasons. For great reasons, Nick. For great reasons.
All right, guys, I got to do a quick ad read here. I'm gonna do it real quick. All right. American Football Story is brought to you by Coach Paint. Coach Paint is a great tool that allows us to add graphics to player highlight clips similar to graphics you see on TV. Coach Paint offers the ability to clearly tell a straight video while increasing retention of information in a short amount of time. Up your game with Coach Paint today. All right, Jeremy, we don't have any questions to stump you on in this episode here, but we'll give you the floor. You got any closing thoughts on the Big Ten midseason report?
IU Ohio State.
Sorry.
Big game this weekend for IU Ohio State.
And you're predicting Indiana to win. Last second field goal?
That'd be great. I will take a win however it gets.
Do the SNL Bear skit for the Hoosiers. Go ahead. You could do that.
Yeah, say that again.
You could do the SNL Chicago Bears for the Indiana Hoosiers.
Da Hoosiers.
Da Hoosiers going to win by 100. Hey, no joke. Jeremy Kohlman predicted the Indiana Hoosiers would be 8-2 this season. Before the season, we talked to him in August. We have it on record. The man called Indiana being 8-2 before the season. So he's got his finger on the pulse of not only Indiana, but as you could tell by just chatting with him here in this episode, the entire Big Ten. Awesome podcast, Jeremy. We appreciate you coming on, joining us tonight. Rob, you got anything else you want to add before you read us out?
Pretty much just like Jeremy said, big time game this week, Indiana, Ohio State. I'm excited. When Big Ten football came back, it really felt like, football as a whole on a collegiate level was back. So having the Big Ten back is definitely great. And we mentioned, the Ohio State Maryland game that we didn't get a chance to see last week. So I kind of feel I missed out on that one. So I would definitely be tuning in this week to Indiana, Ohio State.
And then 1 sec before Rob reads this out, Jeremy, you got anything you want to plug? Should have asked you that earlier.
Got anything I want to plug?
Yeah, you do it at ESPN radio appearances, for example. Where can people find you?
Well, so you can find me, and you can also find Robert Parker on ESPN 1600 radio, AM Denver, on 9:30 on Saturday mornings. You can listen to us live or go to the ESPN podcast page and catch our episodes after they air. We've got a big interview coming on this weekend. You do not want to miss that out.
What's the name of your podcast?
It is The Extra Point.
The Extra Point. The Extra Point on ESPN Radio Denver. What time again? Saturday morning?
9:30 Eastern.
All right. ESPN Denver, 9:30 Eastern. Check it out. The Extra Point. Rob, you want to read us out?
Yeah, I'm going to read us out. So once again, Jeremy, we appreciate you coming on the show. Special guest. Love to have you back again. So appreciate the listeners out there listening to this episode of American Football Stories. You can find us on Apple Podcasts and YouTube. Please subscribe and rate us 5 stars, and follow us on Twitter at American FB Stories, and check out our website at AmericanFootballStories.com. Once again, my name is Robert Parker III, and my co-host is Nick Newsom, and we were joined by Jeremy Kohlman, the Indiana insight of Hoosiers football right there. So once again, thanks for joining us, guys.
Thank you for having me on.
You play to win the game. Hello? You play to win the game. You don't play to just play it. That's the great thing about sports. You play to win. And I don't care if you don't have any wins. You go play to win. When you start telling me it doesn't matter, then retire. Get out. Because it matters.
I hope there's Bigfoot. I don't think there is. The reason I don't think there is because we've found bones of dinosaurs and everything else, but we haven't found bones that I've heard of Bigfoot.
I'm very upset. We should have been in a ball game with fast field goal. The coach had sent him in. We shouldn't have sent him in. That's a dang coaching mistake. That the kids are playing their tail off, and the coaches are screwing it up.
We just got to stop that little inside trap. The option didn't hurt us much. We played pretty hard. We just got to stop that inside thing. Offensively, we kind of sputtered around, got the ball in the end zone. Defensively, we got to get out off the field on that 2-minute drive.
Injuries to your offensive line. What do you do in the second half?
Oh, we're just go play. We just got to keep playing.
Thank you, Coach.
He has a magnificent personality, I'll tell you.
We receive a lot of mail during the course of the season, and a lot of it's good mail, a lot of it's bad. And I would say that most of it is good, though, isn't it, Bill? Yeah, I think so. I'd say 95 to 98% of the mail we get is always good. But the one question that keeps coming up, where Woody Hayes' name is involved, they say you're a man of no mercy, and yet, frankly, I don't care much what they think.